roll.
Alderman Bosley. Alderman Vaquero.
Present.
Alderman Cohn. Alderman French. Alderman Carter. Alderman Green. Alderman Coder.
Here.
Alderwoman Spencer.
Here.
Chairman Kennedy.
Here.
We have 5 present and we have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Would you please excuse Alderman Bosley?
So noted.
Thank you. We have before us today Ms. Tricia Gordon, who is the funding manager and of the Community Investment Division of the United Way. As you know, the United Way has graciously consented to review the applications and give us an evaluation for Prop S. The information that they help provide to the subcommittee helps in their determination of making their recommendations back to this committee as to what programs and proposals would be funded. As a part of that process, we've asked her to come today and discuss how they go about their process, the matrix that they used, and she was kind enough to forward that information to us, which I sent to the committee earlier, and we have here on the desk before us today. So we'd like for her to step forward. We welcome you and thank you for coming today.
Thank you for having me. I do have some packets of some revisions, so these will be more current items to review. So.
One more.
So I'll talk through all of the items that are in the folder. You have 3 different sets of items. You have an overview of the process, which I'll go through briefly to give you some background, just what it entails for us to recruit volunteers and actually go through the evaluation process for Prop S. I also have the evaluation tools that we use, including the metrics, and I'll give you a little bit more insight on how we actually use those tools throughout the process. And then the latter part under the green sheet, we just highlight, but that's actually kind of after the process, something that we provided to the city, Josh and Carl, this year, and I'll give you guys a little insight on that, just how that tool could be potentially used. Again, as Terry said, my name is Tricia Gordon. I'm a funding manager with United Way. I am one of 4 staff that oversee our 170 member agencies. So we're in campaign season. As you know, we have a couple of weeks to go for our $75 million goal. So I always have to put that plug in. And so after we raise our funds, we distribute or allocate our funds to our member agencies. And I oversee a third of those agencies once they are they have the dollars in their hand. I make sure that they're good stewards of those dollars and track them throughout the year. So this process for us is really a big piece of what we do. So it's a good way for us to simulate with some of our other staff members that are not directly involved in the allocations process at United Way to get a feel for what it's like to have dollars brought in and actually have agencies within our local communities apply for these funds. So what we do is we go outside of our division and we recruit from our experts throughout our United Way agency. So that's whether it's finance, whether it's our resource development team, whether it's our 211. So we have a mixture of volunteers that go through this process because most of them live in the city. Some of them are familiar with these agencies. They may even have family members and kids that are recipients of the services. So what we do is we start the process once we've been notified by the city that they'd like for us to take part in this process. We don't assume that it's a given each year. We've been doing this, I think, for the past 4 years now. And typically it's mid-November that we may get the call. So what I do is I send out a request that says that, hey, we've been requested and honored to take part in this process, and we solicit volunteers. We have volunteers that enjoy this process so much that they've actually been doing it for the past 4 years. So they're really, they kind of look forward to it. We normally go through the Thanksgiving holiday to do this. So we have folks that are taking proposals home during the break, and when they come back, they have the results. So just to show you how dedicated folks are to this process. So after we recruit our 20 to 25 or plus volunteers, it's solely based on the number of proposals that we get. So we don't assume that 20 to 25 is enough. Our goal is to make sure that each proposal is reviewed by roughly 3 to 4 people, including myself. I'm kind of like the overseer. And we want to make sure that we're getting diverse perspectives, but because as you know, if one person reviews a proposal, their take may be totally different. So after we get our volunteers selected, we make sure there's no conflict of interest. We make sure that they have no personal ties to these organizations. And then we meet collectively and we go through similar to an orientation for new folks and returning folks. One of my responsibilities is to kind of go through the proposals and see if there have been any changes for the year, if the application or proposal has been revised or updated, and just things that are kind of trending around violence prevention, things that they should be aware of. So we kind of orient them to that, and then we go through a mock proposal as well as looking at the tool to see, okay, if you're going to review this, let's see what this looks like. How does this apply to the metrics? You know, what would this look like when you're in your kitchen table reviewing this and you may have questions? After we go through that, then at the very end, after they've answered questions, we also talk about potential challenges that previous folks that reviewed the proposals may have encountered, things that may be trending, like I said, for the current year. And then we go through and we assign kind of random. We assign the proposals and we make sure that we break the proposals up based on areas. So if we have a lot of church groups or if we have a lot of boys and girls clubs, we try to make sure that each volunteer gets a diversity of that. Once we do that, then we assign them. Like I said, the goal is to make sure that at least 3 to 4 people touch each proposal. They have roughly 1 to 2 weeks. We try to do it less, 10 days in between, to review the proposals. Then we come back collectively as a team to discuss the findings, and then to make sure that the metrics have been filled out completely. That's a quick overview of just the volunteer piece. My role on the back end is to consolidate all of the findings, all of the scores, all of the narratives, and put that into a consolidated, condensed report that's shared with the chair of this committee, and to answer any questions that may come up if they do. And roughly, we put in anywhere from 300 to 400 man-hours doing this, and probably a little bit more, because if you look at each individual person, depending on how much time they take into review, we tell them 45 minutes to an hour, sometimes 2 hours, on the initial proposal if they are a new volunteer. If they're a veteran, they kind of know the ropes, and so they can go through it a little bit quicker. But we want to make sure that they're doing their due diligence, that each proposal is getting a fair amount of time to be reviewed. And if they have questions, I'm not even including that, because I get questions and emails within that 2 weeks. That's how I know that they're really being intentional about the review. If they're not understanding something, they call, they email, and then we may chat about that and then make sure that they're conscious of what they're doing. And then we come back collectively, we consolidate all the questions and potential emails I got throughout the process before we move into me consolidating the final reports. I'll go through the items in the packet that you have. Are there any questions before I move into that?
Now, why don't you go ahead with that?
Sure, okay. So pretty much everything I've covered from the overview, I won't repeat that, but that's just a snippet of the evaluation process. I'll go through the metrics. That's the cream or tan looking sheet. There's actually 3 documents or 3 attachments or 3 stapled items. The top covers what we consider an overview. This is pretty much what every single proposal gets before they're scored. I try to go through and make sure that there's a quick summary provided. I also have the volunteers do one of this for their perspective. So it's kind of like a cover sheet before they're assigned the proposal. And it just highlights the agency's name, proposed number of clients. This is nothing that I made up. It's pretty much the cover sheet that's in the proposal that's given to the applicants to apply, but it kind of condenses it and gives it in a quick view. Some things that we've highlighted to the right corner that I'd like to point out is the funding. like, would you fund this organization? That's something that's asked in the end. And then we also ask if they're a United Way member agency. Since we fund 170 plus member agencies, it's really important to know how many of our member agencies are on the list for proposals, because we don't want there to be a conflict. We're actually tough on our agencies, but we don't want there to be any weight given to our member agencies. So this is important to me to know how many of our agencies that we are recommending move forward to the committee that are member agencies. This typically has no bearing. It's just something that I am conscious of. It hasn't been an issue in the past, but just so you guys know that there are at least a dozen so of the agencies that submit that are United Way member agencies. So just a summary there. The other two pieces are probably the most critical pieces for us, because these are the documents, and this is actually a shorter version. This is the #1 tool that I use when I go through the proposal to make revisions for the year. So I look through and just make sure everything that we're considering for the application from the proposal is on this metric sheet. So literally, when the volunteer is going through each proposal, they're using this metric to kind of be fair to the process. So literally, each line item is measured, each metric is considered for each application or proposal. So one of the things is they do this on their own, and then when we come back as a team, this is what we spend time discussing to make sure that it's been filled out completely. This year, we made a few variations to the top after talking to Josh and Carl. So we had a scoring from 1 to 4, 1 to 5. Really, the numbers, it's not that big of a deal for us, whether it's 1 to 5, 1 to 4, 1 to 3, but just to show you that there is some distinction. So there may be some things this year that correlate to yes or no, more so things that may not be as pertinent to us. When we're reviewing the proposal, we want to go to the content, the meat of the proposal. So those are things that I'll work out with Josh and Carl as far as what is that it's really best for us to review, and what things are out of our purview that really, prior to us getting a proposal, to whether or not they have their city license or whether or not their insurance is up to date, do we really need to review that, or is that something that could be considered after they've been awarded funds? So again, some variations to this will be taken into play, but just wanted to give you an idea of what each proposal is scored against. This looks more so like the proposal for this year. I made some adjustments just recently. One of the biggest pieces for us that's new this year is looking at the A through E, which is section 2, which highlights the services and specific needs that each proposal is going to be addressing. So this will be something during our orientation that we will actually spend a little bit more talking to our volunteers about, because this is a new highlight, and it kind of aligns with what United Way is doing, so it'll be good to really introduce this to our group. There's not a lot of other things that are new. There are some minor changes, but again, we'll spend time going through this. We'll use a sample proposal, answer any questions, and then move on. Any other questions before I go through the green sheet, because that's kind of separate from this piece. So just giving you guys a summary, this is our key tool that we use. It's actually 2 tools, and that's it. And they submit these electronically, which we're able to consolidate using Excel.
You're going to explain the green sheet?
I will. I wanted to make sure if you guys had any questions. Okay. So the green sheet, like I said, is fairly new. This is not a tool that our volunteers will be using. They will be made aware of it, just like other things they'll be made aware of during the orientation that's a little new. This tool is actually a piece that we talked about with the 5 new items that have been highlighted to see which proposals areas they're going to focus on. So what we did was we consolidated potential outcome indicators on the green sheet. So if you look at each section, so academic success, if you're on the front sheet, is first, and child safety. We have justice involved or at-risk youth, and employment/life skills. What we did was we took these areas and broke them down both based on what would be potential items that organization would say they are tracking or looking to measure. And then you have your 1, 2, and 3 for some, and I think there's a couple that have 4 on the back side. These are potential successes that could be measured overall. So this is something that we shared, that if we consolidated the proposals after they had implemented their programs, whether it was 6 months to a year, these could be some tangible outcomes that can be consolidated and even consolidated into a report, but also consolidated for the organizations and something that they could be measured against. So we're looking for you guys to have outcomes in these areas when you do your final report, or whether it's throughout the year. So that's something that we just did just probably within the last couple of months. So we don't use this necessarily during the review process. We don't use this necessarily during the review process, but it would be really critical after the proposals have started, after the organizations have started to implement their program. So this is something that you can kind of keep in your back pocket when you're even considering the proposals at the end. So I would say after you guys make your decision, if organizations have some of these items listed as far as what their potential outcomes will be, it's just a good reference tool, and it already breaks the buckets down for you. So new for this year.
Okay. We can go to questioning. Again, thank you for being here and making the presentation.
Oh, sure.
It's very helpful. Alderman French.
I don't have any questions at this time.
Alderman Vaccaro? Let's move on. Alderman Vaccaro, do you have any questions? Alderman Carter?
No questions, no, sir.
Okay. Alderman Kotor? Alderwoman Spencer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you describe how the United Way's relationship with the city on this? Is United Way, is this a contract that we have? Are you?
Sure.
How do we engage with United Way to provide this, service for us?
Right, so we were approached, like I said, about 3 or 4 years ago, because I've been doing it for the past 3. So I don't know if there was an initial partnership along this, but I know Kathy Gardner, who's my boss, was contacted. I don't know if it was by an alderman or someone else that just asked, would United Way help with reviewing the proposals? I think it was the first year that they had received the proposals. There is no contract, there is no fee. We do this voluntarily. There's no reimbursement, there's no kickback, there's nothing. It's just something that we've done, and we're happy to be a part of the process.
Yeah, from my understanding, Alderwoman Young contacted you.
Okay.
She was the chair of the committee at the time.
Okay. And and I really appreciate, I was one of the aldermen who asked for this meeting, and it's really
Great.
helpful to just understand the process from my perspective, being somewhat new to the allocation of these funds. I would like to also understand a little bit better Josh's role in the process, if that's possible,
Yeah, it is
because he is here, and he does participate in, do you all coordinate? Is that something?
Right, this probably has been the first year that it's been a little bit more intensive, but typically we go through whoever the chair is, they send out the request, share the proposals. I think I worked with Tina last year on this, but typically we get the proposals, we have limited contact with the city as well as you guys. We kind of just work with the chair, and that's it. We've asked for more contact, but we know with the time frame and the quick turnaround and you guys being extremely busy, because one of the pieces that has come out of this process for us each year, since it's something that we do literally every year at United Way, we always like to provide feedback at the end of the year, because our reviewers, they talk about the proposal, they talk about the process, ways to make it better, even the application that goes out to the individuals that are applying. Can we share that information with the committee just to make changes? And so, like I said, we've shared that, and we've seen changes over the year, but still the contact has been limited. So we're happy to be here and be able to share just any feedback. So, yeah.
It's really impressive to have so many, 25 volunteers who are willing to spend several hours combing through these applications. Without going into details about, could you share just kind of a general picture of who is really benefiting from this process and willing to spend that time doing that?
Yeah, so even internally with United Way, we're 150 plus strong, 200 including part-time, and so it's not easy for us to know all of our day-to-day processes. So within our division, allocations, where we're responsible for allocating the $40+ million, even folks that work with us don't know what we do. So anytime we can give them a snippet into what we do, how tough it is to make decisions to allocate money, how tough it is to recruit volunteers to go through this process, and then to be able to award agencies, or even tell agencies you didn't get funding, apply again next year, to give them a snippet in that it really helps. So this is a good example of us being able to do that. So not only are we giving back to the city and helping you guys achieve something that's really great, internally, we're able to show our volunteers and our staff from a volunteer perspective what it's like. And so we have a wide range of volunteers. Myself as a funding manager, I do it all the time, as well as my team members, but to have 211 members who are on the call all day, on the front end, listening to folks call in for services and actually referring them to some of the agencies that are on the list, you take a step away from that and actually review a proposal by one of these agencies. So 211 staff, our RD staff that go out and campaign and fundraise. They don't do any direct service. They have no direct contact with our member agencies, but they're raising money for these agencies to provide great services for them to take a step back and say, let's see what type of work these agencies actually do. So 211, our campaign, even some of our executive assistants, myself, like I said, some of my funding manager team. We also have our program and evaluation team. So all different walks that come through. So really anybody that will take advantage of this opportunity, we encourage it. It's not mandatory. You know, we send it out to all of our senior execs and then they funnel it down to their team members and they say how important it is. Please take advantage of this. We don't give any kickbacks. We don't give them any time off. We don't say you're gonna earn 8 hours. You do this just to learn the process, and hopefully it's something that looks good that they can put into their HR file, so if internally they want to apply and say, I've had a chance to experience the allocations piece. The only missing thing is they don't make the actual decision about the money. That comes back to the committee. But reviewing the proposal is really the meat of the work. You really get to see true insight as far as what these agencies are doing. So again, it's very diverse. If that answers your question. So we may have roughly 4 to 5 per department, sometimes a little bit more. So
But they're significant number of the volunteers are staff members?
significant of our volunteers are staff members, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Does United Way help just look at reviewing proposals for other funding sources in the region?
Yeah, we're invited a lot. Sometimes we have to tell folks no. We are invited to give feedback and review a combination. So it may not be that we're reviewing the entire application, so combination of reviewing a full proposal, combination of giving insight on their program and evaluation methods, insight on what outcome indicators, what should they be looking for, insight on just how to develop a proposal, what's the best questions to ask for this particular service area versus another. So a lot of times we're at the table, but maybe not to the extent that we're going through their entire process. So kind of like similar to here, we're just doing the review, but we're not making decisions on the back end, and then on the front end, we don't really do anything with your application. So we're just coming in at the most critical time of reviewing, so it looks different.
Okay.
And we also have volunteers from our different regions too that will take part.
Well, that's all I have right now. I think this has been very helpful. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for dedicating the United Way to this effort. It's really helpful for us, and I appreciate the review of this process.
Sure, thank you for having me.
Alderwoman Ingracia, did you have anything?
Yes, thank you.
Any other committee members? I would just like to point out, this has evolved over time. The legislation that created Prop S says that the determination for the funding is made by the Public Safety Committee of the Board of Aldermen. It did not spell out a process. And so the process has evolved over time. At one point, the committee considered and looked very much to the Recreation Department to help in the process, because they were thinking about these as being, many of these programs are being around recreation. That kind of fell apart because the Recreation Department wanted to apply for some of the money, and that was clearly a conflict. And so then the committee had to pull away from that. At the same time, the committee over the years, and it has been that many years, but over the years wanted to have some third-party review of the applications so that it can use that a more objective way to go through them. And so then, and I supported it, the committee chair at that time, Alderman Phyllis Young, contacting United Way to take care of that function. I was not chair of the committee at that time, and so I did not have direct interaction with United Way. And part of the problem that we have here at the Board of Aldermen is continuity. When one chair leaves, all that information is not always transferred over to the next chair. We had a little bit of that here. So it took a moment to even find out who was the person the committee was in contact with at United Way. Once we're able to do so, then we had to really rush around and get that material to you after making the contact. So we do very much appreciate for your help last year, and then coming here today to review how you do it. And it's a very interesting way that you go about it. And I think that the committee is pleased to hear that information. Is there any other comments or not? Any questions? Did you have anything? Anyone else? Okay.
One thing I'll share, just to add to Kara's question, is one of the things that we do, and you just kind of reminded me just with one of your statements about your recreation department. So we have literally over 200 plus corporations that give, and sometimes a little bit more in different respects. But one of the things that we do is we offer, so when I think of Citi and Wells Fargo and Edward Jones, we offer additional services for our corporations that give. And one of the things that they like to do is have grant-funded programs. And so one of the things that we do is we do simulated allocation processes for them. So this accomplishes a couple of things. Not only does it put United Way at the table and kind of help them think through the process, but they're able to use their own team members in some cases with a combination of volunteers. And I just say that to say that I know it could be tough using internal staff to work through the process, but it's definitely a good idea when you think about the individuals that are given to the tax piece. And if you have staff members that work for the city that are at a level where they are willing to give, it's just great just to hear you say that. I know you said it was tough, but just know that that is something that we do it's a part of our process too. We will bring other volunteers. They have to be willing too, but at least it takes them out of their day-to-day. It takes them out of their supervisors or someone from the committee overseeing them. It's a neutral party, but at least you have someone from the city that's at the table. So not saying add that, but I just wanted to speak on that because that is something that we do internally too for some of the other review processes that we do. And we're with them from the beginning to the end.
All right, I don't believe we have any other questions. Again, we thank you and appreciate your being here today.
All right.
There's no other items on the agenda, so that our meeting's adjourned.